This episode was recorded live when I was in Pittsburgh. It was the last Sunday in May, and I had the distinct privilege of having a conversation with Rabbi Daniel Fellman, who is the head of one of the largest reform shuls in Pittsburgh. He and Rabbi Genack, who invited me to come speak in Pittsburgh with his shul, an Orthodox shul called Shari Torah. He and Rabbi Genack developed this really beautiful relationship, and Rabbi Fellman, in the course of that relationship, as it was developing, Rabbi Fellman shared with Rabbi Genack that he had a story about how he lost a baby a long time ago after a long fertility journey. And Rabbi Fellman very openly and frankly, willingly, agreed to have a public conversation with me in front of an audience on Sunday morning, where he talks about his experience, he and his wife, really, their experience trying to have a baby, how he navigated dealing with being a rabbi and dealing with some incredibly, incredibly difficult decisions and also just circumstances. You'll see I did very little talking during this interview because Rabbi Fellman is obviously clearly a practice speaker. He speaks in front of his congregation on a weekly basis. But I was really so taken with his openness, his honesty, and also his humor. He's so fun to listen to. I mean, we're speaking about an incredibly deep and really difficult topic. This is a story about how he lost his son, and also trigger warning for everyone, and also just all of the things that came before and all of the things that came after. These are not easy topics, and yet I could have sat and listened to Rabbi Fellman for hours. And many people in the audience said this after he left. We unfortunately only could record for about an hour because he had a memorial service to do afterwards. But this conversation was a real gift. And you'll hear the surprise. We kind of snuck that in right at the end where we shut the conversation down and he's like, actually, here's one more thing I really need to tell you, but I want to say it off camera. And then he shared this other piece. And I was like, hold on, we need to get that. I want people to hear it. It's so deeply important that you of all people are sharing it. No spoilers, but trust me, you're going to want to hear the end of this. Take a listen. Hi, I'm Dr. Amy Barron, the founder and executive director of the nonprofit I Was Supposed to Have a Baby. On this podcast, I invite different people to join me in conversations about infertility, pregnancy loss, infant loss, surrogacy, adoption, and so much more. We laugh, we cry, and we challenge the Jewish community to think differently about a topic that has been shrouded in secrecy and shame for so long. So join me as we talk away the taboo. We're here today to be witnesses and supportive of his journey. And that's what this conversation is all about. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, please introduce yourself. Tell people who don't know you. I know Rabbi Genack gave you a beautiful introduction, but tell people who you are. And I think what I'd love for you to do is center us, because this conversation is all about your fertility journey and your life. So if you could center us and take us back and when you met your wife, sure, what you were thinking about in terms of building your family, give us the background.
Let me begin by saying, when Rabbi Genack calls me his friend, that's the highest compliment I can be paid. So Rabbi Genack is a dear friend, and he and I both arrived in Pittsburgh about the same time, about 5 years ago. And the truth is, we both recognized in each other that the community and both of us are way better off with the two of us being good friends. And so we've been able to really have a great relationship. Most of the time, it's one of us accosting the other one walking down Murray or at Murray Avenue Kosher. But occasionally, we actually do good work together. It really is a thrill to be here. My wife, Melissa, and I met in the summer of 2002 I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. Melissa grew up in East Lansing, Michigan. Reasonably similar backgrounds. I was in rabbinical school at the time at Hebrew Union College, which is the Reform Movement's flagship seminary. And I was serving a summer pulpit in Petoskey, Michigan. Petoskey is a little resort town up north, just north of Traverse City. And she came to the Meet the Rabbi barbecue. And this was my second summer. The first summer, I was the youngest by 35 years. The second summer, in walked somebody else who was also in their 20s. So, of course, we started talking. And within a couple of weeks, we started dating, and that was that. She's an only child. I'm the youngest of four. We both liked the idea of having a large family. We both talked about that from the get-go. And that was sort of part of our plan and our idea. We got married in the summer of 2004. I was ordained in June of 2005, and we moved to central New Jersey. And something like the Jewish Fertility Foundation didn't exist yet then. I can only imagine how much more helpful it would have been for us on our journey had you guys been there. And so I'm thrilled that it exists today. We began trying to have a child in, I think we waited about 6 months to get settled in New Jersey. So late 2005. And Melissa was diagnosed with what was then called polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is a condition that her ovaries produced too many immature eggs at once. And so she had to start taking shots and medicines to try and get her ovaries to produce as they should. When we started this whole process, it was never a question of her fertility or mine. It was always ours. And I'd love to tell you that we had some long, serious conversation that determined that. We didn't. It was just, we were in this together. Melissa and I have always had a very qualitarian kind of marriage and relationship. And so it was our fertility challenge, and that was the end of it. And it has always remained that. So we went through all of the shots and the medicines and all of that. And we weren't getting anywhere. And they had me do donations, which is no great joy.
Tell people what you mean by donations. Sorry. Because not all people may know. And I think it's important to just to share.
Right. So harvesting eggs and sperm are two very different propositions. To harvest eggs is it fair to call it surgical?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a surgical procedure, and it's uncomfortable. To harvest sperm, it's not surgical. Quite literally, they sent me into a little room and handed me a magazine.
And a cup.
And a cup.
With a lid.
With a lid. And it was, it is just not pleasant. It's not comfortable. It's not, Melissa and I were really lucky. We found soulmates in each other. And so intimacy was something that was truly sacred, still is truly sacred for us. So to be doing this in a crappy little room in a doctor's office just did not feel right. I did what I had to do, right?
I really appreciate you speaking about that. We didn't actually plan this part beforehand, but it's actually an aspect that a lot of people don't talk about because it's private and it's embarrassing and it's.
I remember that day very clearly in my mind. I could tell you what I was wearing. I remember very clearly that day. I stopped there first thing in the morning on my way to the office, to the synagogue. It was a strange day. It was a really strange day. And I remember calling her. It was just, we did what we had to do. That's all. It just, that it was, this is the path we're on. Okay. So this is the path we're on. In the fall of 2006, we were going through all of these things. They decided to do an IUI, an intrauterine insemination, in December of 2006. And they said, we're not sure this is going to work. The next step is IVF. And at that point, IVF had a pretty significant price tag. It was about $10,000 a round. I have no idea what the numbers are today.
I was going to say the numbers today are 20 and up. So just to give people context, but even $10,000.
That $10,000 in 2006 was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of money that we didn't have. And we had talked about how are we going to pay for this? And our health insurance, trying to remember if it was mine or hers. We both had health insurance through our jobs. One of them had a better system than the other. And so we sat comparing the health insurance plans, trying to figure this out. And that was actually the determinant of which health insurance plan we were going to use. Uh, we kept thinking, do we want to go to our families and ask for help? That was an uncomfortable proposition. We both came from families where we had relatives who had significant means. I mean, it wasn't a question of the money not being there. The question was, how do you have this conversation? And how do you,
Of course,
how do you turn to a relative and say this? And the IUI, I don't remember being a significant charge. I mean, that one we paid for ourselves. It was significantly less than
Yes.
what the IVF was. I don't remember what it was, and I don't remember it being an issue. So we did the IUI, and then we went off that winter break to Cape May for New Year's, to celebrate New Year's. And we sort of thought it was our last little hurrah before we had hell to face. Little did we know that the IUI took. And when we came back in January, she had a doctor's appointment the first week of January, and surprise, there were two. Are they zygotes at that point, or are they? I don't know what the right word is.
Two. There were two.
There were two, right? There were
Yeah.
two. And I have twins in my family. My father has a brother and a sister who are twins. My mother has older brothers who are identical twins. We had always joked among my siblings and I that one of us was going to end up with twins. When they found out that I was the one who was having twins, they all said, "Oh, you deserve it the most." And then they looked at Melissa and said, "We're really sorry." And all three of them did the same thing. The pregnancy proceeded. And then on May 9th, which was a Thursday, Melissa was working as a social worker at a hospital. She came home from work. It was a Thursday. Thursdays had typically been the day that I took off. I had baked potatoes cooking in the oven. And she said, my stomach's not right.
What kinds? Sweet potatoes or regular potatoes?
Regular.
Okay. Just tell. Okay.
And she said, my stomach isn't right. And I said, okay. I mean, she had the usual symptoms of pregnancy, whatever it was. I said, "What'd you have for lunch?" She said, "Mexican." I said, "Well, what'd you do that for?" And she said, "Well, because they had it at the hospital." And I said, "Well, where'd they bring it in from?" And she said, "They didn't. It was from the hospital." And I said, "Well, what'd you do that for?" She said, "I'm going to go lay down." She laid down, and things got progressively worse pretty quickly. Next thing we knew, her water broke, and then there was blood everywhere. Our living room looked like a murder scene. We called the ambulance. For some reason or other, I remembered to turn the oven off.
Okay. It's good that you came home and your house was still standing. So that's obviously
I was home that day. I have no idea what gave me the presence of mind to turn the oven off, because usually I'm as flaky as it gets. But
thank God.
We went to the hospital. They told the twins were fraternal. They told us that the sac that baby A was in had ruptured, and that she was going to deliver A. At this point, she was 22 weeks into the pregnancy, and they told us that at 22 weeks. The strong likelihood was that the child wouldn't survive, that there was a possibility of heroic measures maybe doing something, but even so, the child would be left with profound difficulties. What did we want to do? And even though I was at that point an ordained rabbi and had spent time in Jewish text, there was no clear Jewish answer. And so we sat in the hospital room that Thursday night and cried. And at one point, there was a resident who was an Argentinian Jewish guy, and he was talking about this, and he was really lovely. And we went out to the hall, and I said, "Tell me what's really going to happen." He said, "Your wife's going to deliver this baby, and the odds are the baby's not going to make it." And I said, "Okay, what about the other one?" And he said, "The other one, odds are very high that she's going to deliver the second one too, and you're going to lose the second one." And I said, "How high?" And he said, "Better than 99%. And then looked at me and said, "But somebody's got to win the lottery." I have no idea what possessed him to say that. Thursday night, things settled down. Friday, they moved her into an L&D room. Friday, right around noon or so, she went into labor. Baby A came out. They cut the cord, pushed the placenta back in to try and trick her body. We never saw, held, touched baby A. His body was taken to the NICU. He lived for a few hours and died just before Shabbos came. We stayed in the L&D room. amazingly, her body settled down pretty quickly. And throughout Shabbos, her body was chill. And we thought, whoa, something happened here, and we couldn't explain it. By fluke, we happened to be at the biggest maternal fetal hospital in the state of New Jersey, which at that time was St. Peter's in New Brunswick. And the head of maternal fetal medicine came in Sunday morning and said, we've got a fighting chance. Most people don't make it this far. We're going to do an amniocentesis to see what happens, see what's going on with the other baby. They did it. It came back clean enough. I never asked the particulars of the details. And they did a procedure called a cerclage, where they sew closed the cervix. And it worked. And they kept Melissa in the hospital for a week to watch her. And I pretty much stayed by her side the whole time. And then she was sent home on bed rest from week 23 at that point to week 30. Well, Zach was born at week 37. At week 36, they took the cerclage out and said, we're going to treat you like a normal pregnancy. Go live. She was really on bed rest. She had one of these monitor things that she had to put on her stomach and call in, and it was, and people were bringing food over and all of this stuff. Up to that point, I had never carried a live cell phone with me on the bima. I did that summer. And I remember the senior rabbi saying, well, what are you going to do if she calls? And I said, I'm going to walk off the bima and take the call. And he said, what am I going to do? And I said, you're the senior rabbi. You'll figure it out. He and I are today very dear friends, very, very dear friends. We were just together this week, actually, in New York. And it was such a fluky kind of thing. Week 37, she woke up one morning and said something's going on. We went to the doctor. Doctor said, you should go to the hospital. We went to the hospital. We're hanging out in the labor and delivery room. Things are happening. We watched Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy right afterwards. The doctor said it's time to push. 2 pushes, and Zach was born. But for who his parents are, he's a totally normal kid. Zach is now almost 19, just finished his first year of college, and is doing beautifully. At 22 weeks, the hospital turned the remains of baby A over to us. Their rule was 20 weeks and under, they take care of the remains. Beyond 20, it's on us. We had no idea what to do. I had no idea what to do. I remember going to my study at the synagogue on Monday and starting to look up to find out where the halakha was, to find out what Jewish law was. And what I found almost instantly was that I had I had fallen into a black hole in halakha. And that there were multiple ways of doing this. If we wanted to, we could mourn the lost baby as a full human being and do a post-mortem bris and do a full-on burial. And in El Malei Rachamim, we would have given him his name, and we could have mourned him fully. Or we could do none of them. And halachically, either path was okay. And so I went back to the hospital that day and said, okay, we got to figure this out. What do we do with this? And we wrestled back and forth. We decided to wait to do the burial until later because we weren't sure what was happening with baby B at that point. And so the burial didn't take place until Thursday, almost a full week after the baby was born, because the thought was, we don't want to do this twice. And that was an unusual halakhic decision. I mean, normally when there's a death, I tell families, the sooner we can do this, the better. It was a really strange few days. Neither of us were at the ceremony. I stayed with Melissa in the hospital. We wrote together a letter to that baby that the rabbis who I worked with did the ceremony, and one of the rabbis read that. We picked out a psalm or two. We did not say Kaddish. I actually grew a beard. And I remember being back in the synagogue a week or so later, and somebody said, would your razor break? They hadn't heard. And I had to explain the whole thing. And I thought, well, okay, here we go.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you
Please.
now exactly at
Please.
that moment, because the question that keeps coming to my mind is, how on earth were you able to balance your professional responsibilities to a congregation doing all the things you needed to do, spiritual advisement, helping other people through grief and loss and all the things, and also the simchas, all of the wonderful things. And you're literally living through an unimaginable situation.
It was hard. It was really hard. It was, look, part of being a rabbi, I don't think I'm giving away any state secrets. If I am, you'll correct me, Itzi, is learning how to compartmentalize a little bit. And so there are times when you've got to go from your child's performance in whatever realm the child is performing to a Shiva house. And you got to be able to just flip in from one to the next. My kids know sometimes they can tell when I walk in the door of the house, if I've gone through one of those things, and they intuitively at this point know to just run up and give me a hug the way the dog does. And I'm forever grateful that they figured that out. I don't know how they did it. It's not my genes, but it's just part of being a rabbi. And it just became part of what I was doing. We decided that we weren't going to broadcast this and make this our raison d'etre, but we also weren't going to hide from it. That we were going to be completely open. We were going to talk about it. We had been open about the pregnancy. We'd been open about the fact that we were expecting twins. There was no good reason to hide any of this. At the same time, so I had been a rabbi all of 2 years at this point. I had had a number of couples who had come to see me about fertility questions along the way already. So Jews comparatively, one of the reasons that Jews have higher fertility issues is because Jews tend to get married later, at later ages, and Reform Jews more so than Orthodox Jews. And so I had congregants who were having fertility issues much more related to age than anything else. And a couple of them had gone through procedures where they conceived multiple fetuses and talked about reductions. So I had gone through those conversations with them before, and even though the details were a little bit different, I had already had some familiarity with it. I grew up in a house that was very politically active. I have 2 older sisters who made sure that I understood very early on that a woman's body is a woman's body, period, the end. And they were very strong influences and remain very strong influences, my mother as well, but my sisters really were the ones who pushed that. I ended up joining the board of Planned Parenthood as much as anything because what I was noticing was that the number of Jewish families who were dealing with questions of reduction was high, way higher than I knew. And at that point, the anti-abortion folks hadn't gone after that piece of the abortion industry. And I thought to myself, I need to do something.
Hi, everyone. It's Amy. I just wanted to take a quick moment to say that if talking away the taboo means something to you, if you've listened to an episode and felt less alone, more seen, or more understood, please support us so we can continue doing this important work. Everything we offer, this podcast, our support groups, our resources, all of them are completely free. And that's intentional, actually, because we never want someone to have to choose between getting help and affording it. But truthfully, we can't do this without your help. So if you're in a position to give even just a little, it really helps keep us going. It helps someone else find the support that they need too. So please donate at iwassupposedtohaveababy.org/donate. It's really easy and it really makes a difference. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being part of this community.
And so I reached out and started getting involved and ended up serving a couple of terms on a board. The politics is one thing. For me, the fertility question was, if a person, from a Jewish standpoint, when they would ask me, what do? I would say, look, the health of the mother comes first. That's the clear Jewish teaching. The question then is, so how do you define all of that? And my definition has always been the full health of the mother is the question. That could be physical health, it could be emotional health, it could be spiritual health. And if for any of those reasons, a reduction is necessary, in my viewpoint, the halakha says go do it. And I wanted to make sure that that possibility remained. So I remember working with one couple who conceived 5, and they knew they were reduce. The question was, how many did they reduce to? Do they reduce down to 3, to 2, to 1? What do you do? And there are risks involved with all of this. So I had already spent a little bit of time in that realm. That probably helped me. The truth is, it was a really hard summer. It was a really hard summer. My mother came and spent a week with us. Her mother came and spent a week with us. We were on the phone with friends and family all the time. It was hard. It was just, it was hard. And people who were close to us, people in the congregation, really tried. They tried to say nice things, but as in any case where people are going through a difficult time, sometimes those words that are meant to be kind work and come across as kind, and sometimes they just fall flat. And I remember one person saying to me, "This is going to make you so much better a rabbi. You're going to be so much more empathetic with people, empathic with people." And I remember thinking to myself, I didn't suck at that before. I don't really need this. And I know the person meant well. I know they meant well. But 19 years later, I can physically, I can physically remember standing in that space having that conversation. And I know they meant well.
It's fascinating, right? It's those comments, which for other people are completely throwaway comments, right? Throwaway comments, but the ones that zinged, I still remember there was one comment for me. It's been 16 years. I remember exactly where I was standing. I remember exactly what I was doing, what I was wearing. I wasn't doing anything with baked potatoes, but yeah. Yeah.
And, in hindsight, I don't think it was a throwaway for them. I think they actually thought they were trying to say something nice to me.
Of course.
I think they really thought they were trying to help me and give me comfort.
Yeah.
Um,
yeah. Can I ask you today, we're now in 2026. The fact that you haven't shared this story publicly per se, I'm guessing in a while, how is it now? How is it over the last number of years? When Zach's birthday comes around, that time of year,
sure.
your wife.
Sure. We haven't hidden this story, number one. So we've talked about it. And through the years, so we left New Jersey and then moved to Syracuse, New York, where I was the rabbi for 12 years. And then we moved here 5 years ago. In both Syracuse and here, actually, the hospitals got wind of that I had this background, and I've been called in to help families with this. So I've had experience with it through the years, and tried to help other families through similar kinds of challenges. It's a part of who we are. It's a scar that we both carry on us physically, emotionally, spiritually. But Yitzi and I both spend a lot of time in cemeteries, way more than by rights we should, because it's what rabbis do. Nobody gets to a cemetery without scars. The only real question is, do you own them and do you work through them, or do they control you? And for Melissa and me, this is just part of our story. Zach's birthday is Zach's birthday. It's all about Zach. In May, around May 10th, May 11th, we think about it. Mother's Day was that Sunday. So the baby was born and died on a Friday, and Mother's Day was 2 days later. That was really hard that year. And Mother's Day still has a little bit of we have 3 kids. We have a pretty full life and a pretty full house and all of that. There's still a little bit of an edge there. Oddly enough, not as much with Father's Day. I think it's because the proximity of when it all happened. It's just part of our story. It's who we are, and Zach. I mean, there are times when we have looked at each other and said, "My God, can you imagine 2 Zachs?" We still sort of say that. And we love Zach dearly, don't get me wrong. But there are at least a few of you in this room who know Zach, and Zach can be a handful once in a while. Zach's a bright, wonderful, intelligent kid who is doing good for the world and is going to continue to do good for the world. There are times when we look back at it and say, how do we get through that? did we really live that? Was that real? Um, I remember being on the phone with my oldest sister on that Mother's Day, and she said, "You guys are our parents already," and we said, "No, we're not." And she said, "Yeah, you are." And I just remember the tears. I remember crying and crying. Um, my siblings were really helpful. Uh, m- m- my sisters and brother and I, my parent, my mother spent a lot of time pregnant in a short period of time. My oldest sister and I are 6.5 years apart, so she had 4 kids in 6.5 years. Uh, we're close enough to we could live on the same block and most of the time be totally fine. We all know how to get under each other's skin in 2 seconds, but they were amazing. All three of them were truly remarkable with us. Uh, Melissa's extended family was too. There were little challenges along the way. Uh, we didn't visit the grave of the baby until after Zach was born, because we wanted to focus on the possibility. When we went there, it was hard. It was really hard. We did not make a regular thing of going to the grave. The next question was, what do you put on the stone? And so we put baby boy Fellman because we never named the child. And I wanted Hebrew, so we put the dates in Hebrew. And from time to time, when I was in that cemetery for something else, I would, at the afterwards on the way out, stop there, but not regularly. When we moved from New Jersey, we both had a little bit of a hard time of walking away. And we talked about, do we bury this child locally? Do we bury this child where her family is in Michigan, where my family is in Nebraska? Again, there's no answer on any of this. We did the best we could. About 7 years ago, we went back. The senior rabbi was retiring and there was a whole celebration. And the kids knew about this. We had talked about it. We took him to the grave. And we were really worried about how Zach was going to react. We just didn't know. Zach was actually pretty chilled. Our middle kid, Jacob, who was born a year and a half later, looked at the grave, looked at us, looked at Zach, and then turned to Melissa and me and said, "If he had lived, would I be here?"
Oh,
That was a hard question. And the answer was, "You're here and we love you." Was that a good answer? I don't know.
yeah.
It was the best we could do at that moment. After Zach was born, the doctor said, "Look, you're going to be very monitored very closely if you have more." And so we started talking about, okay, so if we have a second child, how close do we want them together? We decided that a year and a half was the shortest window. And so we started trying, never imagining that the first shot out of the gate without any assistance at all would work. And it did. And so Zach and Jake are a year and a half apart, and it was like raising puppies. It still is. And then we had Lizzie, our daughter, 4.5 years after that. And Lizzie's pregnancy and Lizzie's life is a whole different story. Lizzie has special needs and it's a whole different complicated thing. There are questions you can answer and there are questions you just live with. And that's what we did. So we worked through it. And from time to time, we look around and say, how did we get here? But to be honest, we ask that question a lot in lots of different realms. And this is just one piece of it. I mean, in the very same way that with Lizzie's special needs, we don't broadcast it, but we also don't hide from it. I've known all sorts of families who have made their special needs child the be all and end all of their entire life story. We didn't want to do that. And so we said the expectations for Lizzie are the same that they are for the two boys, which is to be your best.
Can I ask you about Lizzie specifically?
Sure. Let me come back to one other thing for Zach,
Sure.
and then we'll get into
Okay.
Lizzie. So Zach's first year of college, he has started talking about the twin again, and has said, am I living for him and me?
Mhm. Oh, wow.
And my answer has been, be you. That what happened with the twin, I have no explanation for. God knows it's nothing on you. Be you. He's wrestled with it a little bit. And so I understand that. I've read about it. There's this whole twinless twin piece that's out there. Whatever help he needs, we'll provide for him. It didn't happen until he was already 18 that those questions started coming. So that's one of those interesting little, gifts that keep giving. These pieces keep showing up. So Lizzie is a special needs kid. Lizzie has a thing called Williams syndrome, which is a rare genetic deletion. It's rare enough that they don't test for it. Had they tested for it, I'm fairly confident we would have made a decision pretty easily about what to do with that pregnancy. I think the emotional strain and the emotional well-being of Melissa would have been, it would not have been a terribly difficult decision. That being said, Lizzie is a wonderful, beautiful 12-and-a-half-year-old girl who is full of love and energy, and we smile and laugh with every day. Lizzie world is a much better world than our world. But there again, so we had this dream. So I'm all of 5'7". Melissa's barely 5 feet. We used to joke that we were going to have this row of bowling balls in the back seat. That's where our kids were going to be. On some level, we actually do. They are not at all how we imagined they would turn out back then, when we were just dating and thinking about this and talking about this. But it's who we are. And so the question is, what do you do with the hand you have in front of you? Do you bemoan that you didn't get dealt the cards you thought you were going to get, or do you play the hand as best you can? And our choice has been play as best we can.
And what about the people who right now are coming to you and really struggling and can't see their way through the pain, how they're going to get out of it, how they're going to get past whatever situation they're in? You have the vantage point of being here. How do you advise them? What do you tell people who are sitting in it right now?
The first thing is that they're not alone. That this is far more prevalent and a far more common thing than they realize. And we learned that we weren't alone. The second is that there is no easy answer, that there is no easy path other than putting one foot in front of the other and just keep moving. Just a couple of months ago, I worked with a family who lost a baby at 23 weeks, I think. And it was brutal for them. They had gone through all sorts of fertility treatments. They had tried everything. They conceived. This baby is doing great. Baby is born early, has some problems. At first looked like the baby was going to be okay, and then everything goes sideways. All you do is put your arm around them and say, you are loved. And you have a community around you, and we're here. I don't know that there is any secret perfect pill to take for this one. It just is what it is. And so, I mean, I've also worked with other people through the issue who had fertility issues for other reasons, right? So I've had two friends who had cancer in their 20s, one female, one male. Both of them had to go through fertility treatments before the cancer treatments, because once you go through the cancer treatments, it can play with all sorts of other systems in your body. And so walking through that, both of them were completely single and unattached when they went through the cancer stuff. Walking that road with both of them was a real challenge. And to just say, look, I'm here and I'm with you, and to just keep checking in and being there, and to help them. It's hard. The fertility stuff is not, first of all, people feel guilty about it and take it on the chin themselves. Nobody chooses to have a fertility problem. That's number one. Science hasn't fully explained yet how we got there. The vast majority of our bodies are still unknown. Science has done amazing things, but there's huge parts that are still unknown. Nobody chooses this, number one. Number two, thank God there are now resources that can help people. And so we use those resources. Like every other part of life, there's this sort of dream and image we have in our mind, and then there's the reality. Sometimes they match, and sometimes they don't. And so the question is, what do you do? And I'd be lying if I didn't say I wasn't frustrated once in a while that things didn't turn out the way I had imagined them to. There are certainly moments when I've had that. Most of the time, I'm busy enough and involved enough and filled with joy enough that I don't even notice it. I mean, it's the line from Pirkei Avot, that who is rich, the one who recognizes what they have. And it's not quite an exact translation, Rabbi, forgive me, but
It works. It works.
it's part of that was part of the process for me too. That's sort of how we got there. If you had told me then in May of 07 that I'd be sitting here 19 years later talking about this, mostly with a smile on my face, I would have looked at you like you were from Mars. It was brutal. It was really hard. But I also know that there are paths through even the hardest parts. And there are people around, even in those hardest times, who can be helpful. And if you're lucky, you find them. And if you don't find them, you manufacture them. And you help people around you become those people that you need. And that's what we did. I remember writing a piece. I never published it, but I wrote a piece about entering a black hole. And halakhically, there was no clear answer. Life-wise, there was no real answer. Melissa and I just sort of live with it. And it's just part of our story. It's who we are, and it's part of our family story. And look, until the 20th century, nearly every Jewish family and every human family had infant loss. There's a reason there's a black hole in the halakha. And the reason is because it was so common that halakha gave the out to say, look, if you don't want to be in mourning and avelut all the time, there's this other alternative. Science has gotten us to a point now where it's much less widespread than it once was. But science still doesn't have all the answers. So
Rabbi Fellman had one last piece, the juiciest part. Okay.
So throughout the whole experience, I went through my share of arguments with God. Why is this happening to us? What did we do? I mean, I've devoted my life to, I'm a rabbi, for goodness sakes. What's going on here? Truth is, I had argued with God beforehand, and I've argued with God since. And I would say very bluntly, any rabbi who doesn't spend a fair amount of time arguing with God isn't the kind of rabbi that I would want to send my own family to. But I had a little rebellious streak in me. I might still even. So
we all do. If we're not admitting it, then we're not human. Right. We all have that rebellious streak.
So what would I do? There was a Wendy's we lived in East Brunswick. The hospital was in New Brunswick. I would drive down Route 18 and there was a Wendy's and I would stop and get a burger. Not a cheeseburger, because I never liked cheeseburgers, and God forbid, and God knows not a bacon cheeseburger, but a plain burger. And I would eat it in the car on the way to the hospital to see Melissa, or when we were doing all these checks, just to sort of say, up yours to God. And Melissa would look at me and say, what's with you? I'd love to tell you she has stopped doing that. Still happens all the time.
But that speaks to, right? Like all of us in our wrestling, as we're in our pain, I think some people come closer, take on more, do more, like, oh, like if then the bad things won't happen. And then there are other people that are like, I've been doing all the things and like, still you made this happen. And by the way, at least for me, I know that like flip-flop happens actually every single day.
All the time.
Every single day. It wasn't like, 1 week I was good and 1 week I was bad, whatever.
Every observant person I know goes through that wrestling match somehow or another. Yeah. They don't all go to Wendy's, but they
I didn't go to Wendy's. I mean, I did before I became from, but
but yes, yeah. Yes, that's it. It's part of the equation. Why that one spoke to me, I think it just happened to be that I was driving down the road and drove by it. I think that's all it was. I never stopped at a McDonald's. I never stopped at a Burger King. It was just it was this very weird quirk.
Why? But why was Wendy's more okay?
I have no idea. I have no.
Okay.
I got nothing.
Okay. Okay.
But
I'm taking it.
But I will tell you, taking bites of that burger was like saying, "Screw this! I don't like this situation, and I'm doing something." But then I went back to living my normal life. I mean, I didn't bring non-kosher stuff into my house and trafe up my kitchen. I didn't change how I was observing my Jewish life communally in terms of the synagogue. But for that 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it was in the car, That's how I did it.
I mean, that's called like being a human. It's called
Well,
being a human. Like
that may be a stretch for me. I'm not sure.
okay, you're definitely not an alien, so that I can say.
Depends on who you ask. It was just one of those quirky things. And I mean, it happened years later. I quit eating red meat altogether. So now it doesn't do anything. If, God forbid I needed to rebel against God, I'm not sure what I would do today. But yeah, there was something about taking a bite out of that burger that satisfied something that wasn't a physical taste thing.
Yeah.
It was a doing thing. I mean, I'm sure the food part of me. Look, food has never been my friend, but I'm sure I could play with the psychology and find out, dig into more. But I think there was something physical about doing, and so that's what I did.
It's interesting because for me, I was exactly the opposite. I'm not going to dive in and I'm not going to talk. Like, I'm like, I needed to, like, I felt like I couldn't talk to God anymore. Like, I was still keeping kosher and keeping Shabbos and like doing the things, but like, I felt like I didn't have that conversation with God anymore. And especially so I had I had 4 second trimester losses in a row. And the third of those losses was a few days before Rosh Hashanah. And I was like, I can't go to shul.
Yep.
Like, how could I go to shul? I can barely like talk to people, let alone going to shul. But shofar, like there's an obligation to hear shofar. And for me, it was, well, I can't do any of those things, but I have to hear shofar. And so I asked my rabbi at the time, Rabbi Genak was an assistant rabbi, it was Rabbi Rosenblatt. And I said, can you please just send someone to my house so that they can blow for me? And like, he'd already known that I had had this loss. And I'm like, that like 17-year-old kid or whoever it is going to think I'm crazy because I look fine. Like, I don't have a boot on my foot. I look like I'm healthy. But he's coming to my house to blow. But I felt like that was the way I needed to connect because everything else had to be pushed away.
There are points where things have to be different.
Yeah.
Because you got to just acknowledge it.
Yeah.
We actually, I didn't even talk about this. We had a miscarriage between Jacob and Lizzie that in the grand scheme of things, we just sort of floated through. I think because of what we had been through before. And I mean, enough that in talking about it today, I forgot him. Melissa, I mean, I remember when we found out she was pregnant and we were excited, ecstatic, things were chugging along. And then week 10, I don't know, it was still early. Things went sideways. And we sort of were like, well, how do we mark this? What do we do? And we did it very privately. It was just the two of us because we hadn't talked about the fact that she was even pregnant yet. She didn't go back to synagogue after baby A died until Zach was born end of August. His bris was just before Rosh Hashanah. She came to synagogue for the first time on Yom Kippur. She was home with the baby. And the question was, so what's this going to be like? And she came late and sort of slid into the back after everybody was there. And she slid out early, but she was there. And I remember swallowing hard when I saw her walk in. Because all of a sudden it all came at me, and I'm reading Unetana Tokef that
oh gosh,
yeah, but I'm reading that, thinking that, watching her holding this baby. So the complexity of it all. I mean, it wasn't all A or all B. It was the whole thing together. In my mind, I had to own it. I had to live it. I had to give myself permission to live it physically, emotionally, all the way around. And so the Wendy's burger helped with a piece of that.
Thank you so much for listening. If you have any comments about this episode or would like to suggest a future episode, please reach out at 917-382-0422 or send us an email at info@iwassupposedtohaveababy.org or info@iwsthab.org. And please don't forget to like, rate, and review so we can continue spreading the support to the wider Jewish community.